What if everything you've been desperately searching for has been inside you all along? Think about it for a moment. How many years have you spent looking for God in sacred buildings, ancient scriptures, spiritual retreats, and the wisdom of teachers who promise to show you the way? Has this ever happened to you? That feeling of coming so close to something divine, only to watch it slip away the moment you stepped back into ordinary life? Now, what you're about to discover might surprise you, because the spiritual journey most of us have been on has been pointing us in the wrong direction entirely. We've been conditioned to believe that the divine exists somewhere out there, in a distant heaven, in a holy place, in the words of someone more enlightened than ourselves. And so we keep searching, keep praying, keep hoping that one day we'll finally feel that connection we've been longing for. But before we begin, please hit the like button and let me know where in the world you're watching from today. It's always fascinating seeing who's joining us from around the world. And if you haven't already, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any of our future videos. Smith Wigglesworth understood this struggle intimately. He walked that same exhausting path for years, moving from church to church, practice to practice, looking for something that always seemed just out of reach. But then something extraordinary happened. Not through reading another book, not through attending another service. Through a moment of profound inner stillness, he encountered a truth so simple yet so revolutionary that it changed absolutely everything. The Christ, that sacred presence you've been seeking your entire life, has never been separate from you. Not for a single breath, not for a single heartbeat. Stay with me until the end, because this isn't just another religious idea or spiritual concept to add to your collection. This is about recognizing what you actually are at the deepest level of your being. You see, most teachings tell you what you need to become. They give you practices to perfect, states to achieve, levels to ascend. But Wigglesworth discovered something radically different through his own direct experience. He realized that Christ consciousness isn't a destination you arrive at after years of spiritual work. It's the very awareness that's listening to these words right now. It's not something you need to earn or develop. It's something you need to remember. This recognition didn't come to him through intellectual analysis or theological debate. It came through surrendering the search itself and allowing a deeper knowing to emerge from within his own consciousness. And when it did, his entire relationship with life transformed in ways that seemed almost miraculous to those around him. But here's what most people completely miss about this teaching, and why so many who hear these words never actually experience the transformation that's possible. They hear the words, "Christ lives within you," and they nod their heads. They feel a moment of inspiration, maybe even a spark of hope. But then they file it away as just another beautiful spiritual idea, something nice to believe in, but not something that actually changes how they wake up in the morning or how they face the difficulties life throws at them. Here's the hidden truth that separates those who merely know about this teaching from those who are genuinely transformed by it. This recognition has absolutely nothing to do with intellectual belief. You cannot think your way into this understanding. You cannot accept it as doctrine and expect your life to shift. The mind loves to collect spiritual concepts like trophies on a shelf, admiring them from a distance while continuing to operate from the same fearful, limited patterns it always has. What Wigglesworth pointed to is something far more immediate and alive. Behind every single thought you've ever had, behind every emotion that has moved through you, behind every sensation and perception, there is an awareness that remains constant. It doesn't come and go like your moods. It doesn't change based on your circumstances. This pure witnessing presence, this silent observer of all your mental activity, is not separate from what the mystics have always called Christ consciousness. It's not something you need to invite in. It's what's already looking through your eyes right now. If this message stirred something real inside you, subscribing is a way to keep this conversation going. There's much more to explore together, and I don't want you to miss what's coming next. The moment this shifts from concept to lived experience, something remarkable happens to your relationship with problems. Think about how you currently approach challenges. Most of us meet difficulty with resistance. We fight against what's happening. We exhaust ourselves trying to force circumstances to bend to our will. We believe that peace will come only when the problem is solved, when the situation changes, when life finally cooperates with our preferences. But when you recognize that the divine consciousness within you is already whole, already complete, already lacking nothing, the entire game changes. This doesn't mean problems vanish into thin air. That's not how this works. What transforms is something far more profound than circumstances. Your inner posture shifts. The desperate grip loosens. You stop identifying yourself as the person who has the problem and begin experiencing yourself as the awareness in which the problem appears. This is not denial. This is not spiritual bypassing or pretending everything is fine when it clearly isn't. This is a fundamental revolution in how you relate to your own life. The impact of this shift ripples through everything. Your decisions, your relationships, your capacity to remain present when things get difficult. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic because there's a specific quality of inner peace that becomes available when this recognition stabilizes. And understanding how it works changes your entire journey from struggle to something that feels almost effortless. If something in this is resonating with your own experience, write in the comments, "I'm beginning to see it." Smith Wigglesworth used a phrase that often confuses people when they first hear it: divine indifference. At first glance, it sounds cold, detached, maybe even uncaring. But this couldn't be further from what he actually meant. This is one of those revelations that completely reframes how you move through the world once you truly grasp it. Divine indifference is not about becoming numb to life or disconnecting from your emotions. It's about discovering an unshakable center within yourself that remains peaceful, regardless of what's happening on the surface. Imagine the ocean during a storm. The waves crash violently, the wind howls, everything seems chaotic and dangerous. But dive just a few meters below, and there's stillness, there's calm. The storm continues above, but it doesn't reach that depth. This is what becomes available to you when you recognize your true identity. Fear, that constant companion that has shaped so many of your decisions, begins to loosen its grip. Not because you've convinced yourself to be brave, not because you've repeated affirmations until you believed them, but because you finally understand what you actually are. You are not the vulnerable human personality that can be damaged by circumstances. You are the awareness in which that personality appears. You are the depth beneath the waves. Now here's where most people stumble on this journey. And it's crucial to understand this pattern if you want lasting transformation rather than temporary inspiration. Almost everyone has tasted this truth at some point. Maybe during deep meditation, you felt it's on that sense of boundless peace, of being connected to something infinite. Maybe it happened spontaneously while watching a sunset or holding a newborn child. For a moment, your usual mental noise quieted, and you touched something real. But then what happened? Life resumed. The phone rang. A problem demanded your attention. Someone said something that triggered you. And just like that, the recognition vanished. You went right back to operating from the same limited mindset, the same reactive patterns, the same fearful personality you thought you had transcended. This is not failure. This is simply how the journey works for most of us in the beginning. The secret Wigglesworth discovered is that maintaining this recognition isn't about achieving some permanent state of bliss where challenges never affect you. It's about shortening the gap between losing the recognition and returning to it. It's about learning to see every single situation, especially the difficult ones, as an opportunity to practice expressing from your true nature rather than reacting from conditioned personality. The behind-the-scenes work of genuine spiritual awakening isn't glamorous. It happens in traffic jams, in arguments with loved ones, in moments of disappointment and frustration. These become your training ground. If you've experienced those glimpses only to lose them again, write in the comments, "I know exactly what this feels like." Here's something that might challenge everything. You've been taught about the spiritual path. What if you don't need to become anything at all? What if the entire framework of spiritual achievement, climbing levels, earning grace, purifying yourself until you're finally worthy, is actually pointing you in the opposite direction of truth? Most spiritual traditions, even with the best intentions, create a subtle but powerful message. You are not enough as you are right now. You need more meditation, more study, more discipline, more years of practice. Maybe then, someday, if you work hard enough and surrender deeply enough, you'll finally arrive at enlightenment. You'll finally earn the love of the divine. Wigglesworth's teaching shatters this entire paradigm. And honestly, this is the part that many people resist the most because we've become so attached to the idea of spiritual progress. It gives the mind something to do, something to achieve, something to measure. But the hidden truth is this: Christ consciousness is not something you develop. It's not waiting for you at the end of a long journey of self-improvement. It has been fully present as your true identity since before you took your first breath. You don't need to become spiritual. You need to recognize that you already are what you've been seeking. The revelation here isn't about adding something to yourself. It's about removing the layers of false identity that have been obscuring what was always there. This completely transforms how you approach every aspect of living. Think about how most people pray. They approach God as beggars, asking for things they lack, hoping to receive something from an external source. Healing, prosperity, guidance, peace, always seeking, always reaching outward, always operating from a mindset of insufficiency. But when this recognition takes root, the entire dynamic reverses. You stop trying to get something from God and begin expressing as the divine presence you actually are. Every thought becomes an opportunity to express from wholeness rather than seeking to fill a void. Every action flows from fullness rather than lack. Every decision emerges from wisdom that was never really absent, just unrecognized. Instead of pursuing healing, you begin living from the inherent wholeness that no illness or condition has ever actually touched. Instead of chasing abundance, you express from the infinite supply that exists within your own consciousness, because consciousness itself lacks nothing. This isn't positive thinking or manifesting techniques or trying to convince yourself of something that doesn't feel true. This is a fundamental shift in identity that changes your impact on everything and everyone around you. The difference is subtle, but profound. Seeking keeps you forever reaching for something outside yourself. Living from what you already are anchors you in a reality where nothing essential is missing. One keeps you on an endless treadmill. The other allows you to finally rest in what you've always been. Now I want to explore what this actually looks like in practice, because understanding the concept is one thing, but there are specific ways this recognition expresses through real human experience that might completely change how you see your own life. If this shift from seeking to living from resonates with you, write in the comments, "I'm ready to stop seeking." Let me share something that moves this from abstract concept into lived reality. These aren't theories. These are actual transformations that happened in people's lives when this recognition moved from their heads into their direct experience. Sarah had been battling chronic anxiety for 15 years. 15 years of therapists, medications, breathing techniques, cognitive strategies, and countless approaches promising relief. Some things helped temporarily. Nothing lasted. The anxiety always returned, sometimes stronger than before, accompanied by physical symptoms, chronic muscle tension that no massage or physical therapy could permanently release, a constant tightness in her chest, a mind that wouldn't stop spinning worst-case scenarios. If these words landed somewhere meaningful for you, a simple like lets me know we're on this path together. It's a small gesture, but it truly matters. When she first encountered this teaching about divine presence being her true identity, her skeptical mind dismissed it. She had tried so many things. Why would this be any different? But something in her was desperate enough to experiment. So during her next wave of intense anxiety, instead of fighting it, analyzing it, or trying to breathe through it, she simply acknowledged the presence within her. She didn't try to make the anxiety go away. She just recognized that there was an awareness observing the anxiety, and that awareness was completely untouched by the panic moving through her body. The shift didn't happen overnight, but within weeks, something fundamental changed. Not the circumstances of her life, but her relationship to her own inner experience. A deep, unshakable peace began emerging beneath the surface turbulence. And here's what surprised her most. The chronic muscle tension she had carried for over a decade started releasing on its own. No intervention, no therapy, Her body simply began letting go of what it had been gripping so tightly, once her identity shifted from the anxious person to the awareness holding that person. Michael's journey looked completely different on the surface, but the underlying transformation followed the same pattern. His business had failed. Debt was mounting. The life he had built was crumbling, and with it, his sense of identity and security. He discovered these teachings at his lowest point, and like many of us, his first instinct was to use them as a tool, a technique to manifest his way out of the crisis. This is actually a crucial distinction. When Michael tried to apply spiritual truth to fix his financial problems, nothing changed. He was still operating from the same mindset of lack, just dressed up in spiritual language. The breakthrough came when he completely stopped trying to use these principles and simply began living from the recognition of who he already was. He stopped identifying as someone with problems that needed solving and started resting in the infinite consciousness that lacked nothing. The external changes seemed almost mysterious. Former clients appeared out of nowhere with opportunities. Unexpected doors opened that he could never have planned or predicted. Within 8 months, his financial situation had completely reversed. But Michael will tell you the real miracle wasn't the money. It was the complete transformation of his relationship to security itself. He no longer needed external conditions to feel safe because he finally understood where his true security actually resided. Now, I want to explore something that these stories reveal about how genuine transformation actually works, because there's a pattern here that applies to every area of life. Whether you're facing health challenges, relationship struggles, or any form of limitation. If either of these stories mirrors something in your own experience, write in the comments. This gives me hope. Margaret's story takes this even further, into territory that challenges what most of us believe is possible. She had been given 6 months to live. Advanced cancer had spread throughout. Her body and conventional treatments had failed to stop its progression. When someone first suggested she explore the spiritual dimension of healing, she felt genuine fury. It seemed like an insult, offering platitudes when she was facing death, leaving behind children who needed their mother. But something happens in our darkest moments. When every external option has been exhausted, when the mind finally runs out of strategies, there's sometimes an opening to something deeper. Margaret didn't come to this teaching with hope or faith. She came with nothing left to lose. She began simply resting, not praying desperately for healing, not visualizing tumors shrinking, not trying to manifest a miracle, just resting in quiet recognition of something within her that existed before the diagnosis and would exist after her body was gone. The shift was subtle at first. She stopped identifying herself as a person with cancer and began recognizing herself as eternal spiritual consciousness temporarily experiencing a physical challenge. This distinction might sound like semantics, but behind the scenes of her inner world, everything was changing. Her doctors couldn't explain what they observed. Tumor markers that had been climbing began dropping significantly. Scans showed improvement that defied the expected trajectory. And within 6 months, the same time frame she had been given to live, all traces of cancer had disappeared from her body. Margaret always insisted that the physical healing, as remarkable as it was, wasn't the real miracle. The real transformation was in her identity. She had discovered who she actually was, and that discovery remained with her long after her health was restored. She had touched something that death itself could not threaten. Now, how do we actually cultivate this recognition in practical, everyday terms? This is where Wigglesworth's teaching becomes something you can work with directly, not just admire from a distance. He spoke about maintaining what he called the listening attitude. This isn't complicated. It doesn't require hours of meditation or special techniques that take years to master. It's simply a gentle, ongoing awareness of the divine presence within you during all your normal activities. While you're cooking breakfast, while you're commuting to work, while you're having a conversation or washing dishes or sitting in a meeting. Throughout your day, you take brief moments to pause and silently acknowledge a simple truth. The Christ that I am is present right now. You're not trying to feel anything special. You're not waiting for mystical experiences. You're simply remembering what is already true about your identity over and over, until this remembrance becomes more natural than forgetting. What happens gradually is profound. Your center of gravity begins shifting. Instead of being anchored in your personality, with all its fears, preferences, and reactions to circumstances, you become increasingly anchored in that changeless awareness that has been witnessing your entire life. Decisions start flowing from a different place. Your impact on others begins changing in ways you couldn't manufacture through effort alone. This is the behind-the-scenes work that nobody sees but that changes everything. And there are other practical techniques that build on this foundation, ways of engaging with others and handling emotions that accelerate this shift into your lived reality. If you're ready to begin practicing the listening attitude in your own life, write in the comments, "I am present now." The second practice extends this recognition beyond yourself and into every interaction you have with other people. This is where things become truly powerful, because the impact of your transformed perception begins rippling outward in ways you might not expect. When someone comes to you with a problem, a friend struggling with illness, a family member drowning in financial stress, a colleague overwhelmed by circumstances, the natural human response is sympathy. We feel their pain. We identify with their struggle. We see them exactly as they're presenting themselves, as a person with a problem that needs solving. But Wigglesworth taught something radically different. Instead of sympathizing with someone's limited experience, you silently recognize their spiritual identity. You see past the temporary circumstances and perceive the divine consciousness appearing in human form. You hold in your awareness the truth of who they really are, even when they've completely forgotten it themselves. This isn't about denying their pain or dismissing their experience with empty positivity. It's about maintaining a deeper knowing while still being fully present and compassionate. The hidden truth is that your perception of others actually affects them. When you consistently see someone through the lens of their limitation, you unconsciously reinforce that limitation. But when you hold the recognition of their divine nature, even silently, even without saying a word about spirituality, something shifts in the space between you. People begin sensing something different in your presence. They can't always articulate what it is, but they feel more at ease around you. They feel seen in a way that goes beyond their current struggle. A quality of deep acceptance emanates from you that allows their own divine nature to surface naturally. You're not trying to fix them. You're not offering advice or solutions. You're simply being a space of recognition that gives them permission to remember who they actually are. Now, the third practice addresses something we all face daily: challenging emotions. Anger, fear, sadness, frustration, jealousy. These experiences move through every human life. Most approaches either tell us to fight these emotions, suppress them through willpower, or endlessly analyze their origins through therapy and self-examination. This teaching offers a different path entirely. When a difficult emotion arises, you don't resist it. You don't pretend it isn't there. And you don't dive into mental stories about why you're feeling this way. Instead, you simply recognize your true identity in that very moment. You acknowledge what's happening with complete honesty. I am experiencing anger right now. But then you add the crucial recognition. Anger is not what I am. I am the divine consciousness observing this temporary emotional weather pattern. This isn't suppression. You're fully allowing the emotion to be present. And it isn't denial. You're acknowledging exactly what you're experiencing. What it creates is healthy space. Space between what you truly are and what's temporarily moving through your experience. Emotions are like weather. They arise, they intensify, they pass. The sky remains unchanged by every storm that moves through it. When you begin relating to your emotional life from this recognition, something remarkable happens. Feelings that once hijacked you for hours or days begin moving through much more quickly. You stop adding mental fuel to emotional fires. The drama that used to consume your inner world loses its grip because you're no longer identified with it. This completely transforms your capacity for wise decisions. When you're not lost in emotional reactivity, clarity becomes available. Responses emerge from wisdom rather than triggered patterns. And there's more to understand about the obstacles that arise on this journey, the common traps that catch almost everyone who attempts to live from this recognition. If you've struggled with being overwhelmed by difficult emotions, write in the comments, I am not my emotions. Understanding these practices is essential, but there are specific traps along this path that catch nearly everyone at some point. Wigglesworth was very clear about these obstacles, and recognizing them can save you years of frustration and misdirected effort. The first trap he called metaphysical malpractice. This might sound like a strange term, but it describes something incredibly common. It happens when you take spiritual truth and try to use it as a technique to get what your personality wants. You learn about divine abundance and immediately try to manifest a better income. You hear about spiritual wholeness and attempt to use recognition as a healing method. You understand Christ consciousness and try to leverage it for success in business or relationships. The problem is subtle but crucial. When you use truth as a technique, you're still operating from the mindset of lack. You're still the separate person who needs something they don't have. The whole point of this teaching is recognizing that you already are what you've been seeking, but using it as a tool to get things keeps you trapped in the identity of someone who lacks. This is why many people study these principles for years and never experience genuine transformation. They've turned revelation into strategy, and strategy keeps the ego firmly in charge. The second obstacle is intellectual understanding without heart recognition. The mind loves to collect insights. It feels satisfying to understand these concepts, to be able to explain them eloquently, to discuss them with others who are on similar paths. But understanding about truth and recognizing truth directly are completely different experiences. Many people mistake mental comprehension for actual awakening and wonder why their lives haven't changed despite all their knowledge. Then there's the trap of expecting instant dramatic results. We live in a culture of immediate gratification, and that mindset bleeds into our spiritual life. When transformation doesn't happen on our timeline, we assume something is wrong with the teaching, with our practice, with ourselves. But genuine integration often unfolds gradually. The behind-the-scenes shifts in consciousness don't always produce immediate external changes. Patience isn't just a virtue here, it's essential. Finally, many people exhaust themselves trying to maintain awareness through sheer willpower and mental effort. They turn recognition into another task, another thing to achieve, another standard to measure themselves against. But this recognition is your natural state. It doesn't require strain. The journey is less about building something new and more about relaxing into what has always been present. When you avoid these obstacles and allow recognition to deepen naturally, something remarkable begins happening in every area of your life. Work transforms from desperate survival into genuine expression of your divine nature. You stop grinding and start flowing. Business decisions begin emerging from a place of inner wisdom rather than fear-driven calculation. You find yourself taking actions that you couldn't have planned, but that turn out to be exactly right. Relationships begin healing in mysterious ways. Issues that seem to require difficult conversations and painful processing simply dissolve without being directly addressed. Your changed presence creates space for others to change without any demand or expectation from you. Health and vitality improve as your decisions about food, rest, and movement start flowing from inner knowing rather than external rules or fear-based discipline. The body responds to being recognized as a perfect expression of divine consciousness rather than a problem to be managed. This is what advanced integration looks like. Not dramatic spiritual experiences, but a quiet, steady transformation of ordinary life into something extraordinary. If you've caught yourself falling into any of these traps, write in the comments, "Now I understand why." If you've made it this far, there's a reason. This message found you at exactly the right moment in your journey. Something within you recognized the truth being pointed to here. Not because I said anything particularly clever, but because part of you already knows what you are. You were simply remembering. This is what we explore together on this channel. Not surface-level inspiration that fades by tomorrow, but genuine recognition that transforms how you experience every moment of your life. If this resonates with something deep inside you, consider subscribing so we can continue this journey together. There's so much more to uncover, and each video builds on the last in ways that create real, lasting shifts in consciousness. If this content touched something real in you today, leaving a like is a simple way to let me know this connection we've created matters to you too. It also helps others who are searching for exactly this kind of understanding find their way here. And I'd love to hear from you directly. Drop a comment below with the words, "This was meant for me." When you write that, you're not just leaving a comment. You're acknowledging something important about your own readiness to live from a completely different place. Now, there's a video right here that goes even deeper into how this recognition expresses through the challenges and opportunities of daily life. It picks up exactly where we're leaving off and takes you further into practical application. Click on it and continue with me over there. Thank you for being present through this entire message. That presence, that willingness to stay and listen and consider, is itself an expression of the very consciousness we've been discussing. I'll see you in the next one.